Okay, so we're here for another deck profile for Gate Ruler. Again, we're focusing on another Overlord deck. There'll be maybe a few more decks. I haven't thought of any ones that I want to really make, but if not, I will be doing product opening for set 4 when it releases in English, which will be sometime in May. So I may not be posting videos as much till then, unless there is like a deck that I randomly like come across that I really like. But I have been trying other decks, and this one has actually been in response to what a lot of like my play group has been doing, which is something actually a lot of people have been posting about, you know, certain decks. So this is sort of like a type of control deck, and again, usually control decks are in most card games usually form based on, you know, what deck is mostly played because it's meant to counter it, or those types of things. So this is actually a control deck, but it is also a Genesis summoning deck that's taking advantage of the yellow and red, so Volnar and Yomajin front archetype. And then Genesis summoning has just generally been very good in those colors. So again, we are using Overlord. We are running, the first card we are running is for Vabelcion. So Belcion is a very good defensive card, as well as it can use its DR3 to get rid of units. And then because, again, we are playing it for 1 cost, we don't have to worry about the discount. As well as it is a potential Genesis summoning target because it is a dragon. But a lot of times we would rather have this in our hand as a defense, you know, where you can use its Sentinel summoning to defend yourself from your opponent's ruler's attack, as it will stop any ruler that's not Berserker. Or at least, you know, it'll survive the ruler's attack. Next we're running for Alba Vaults. Alba Vaults is very good, especially with all of the defenses that people try to place in the center. With 7 attack, it can clear pretty much anything except for Cthulhu at the moment from the Excavator side. As well as when it comes to play, it heals, so it keeps us, you know, alive a little bit longer. As well as, again, with Breakthrough, it helps us push damage through, as well as being the main Genesis summoning target for this deck. We also have 2 Aris, the level 2 Aris, 442. We're not actually running the level 3 Aris, and we'll get to that when we get to some of the cards near the end, because there's a reason we're trying to actually stop those type of decks as well. So because of that, we don't want to stop our own units from doing it. But again, for this one, Aris is just another Genesis summoning target that can heal. You could also replace this Aris with the level 2 dragon. The one from the starter deck that heals and destroys a unit because it does 2 for 1. The only problem is that one only works as a when it's special summoned, whereas Aris can still use its defender ability if you just play it from your hand. As well as Aris can go back with our main Genesis summoning summoners. Whereas the dragon can only go back with Paula, which sometimes comes up a little bit weird, but usually Aris is enough. And again, the whole point of is to heal, so that way we can keep going a little bit longer. Next we have is our first Genesis Summoner. We're only running 2 different ones. So the first one is Shiori. Still a very good card. When you summon it, you can bring back one of the familiars, and then you can, you know, Genesis summon them into one of the dragons or warriors. So again, either the level 3 Aris, level 2 Aris, level 3 Alba Vaults, or even potentially Belcion. But usually, again, you'll be going for Alba Vaults. Next we have is for Paula. Paula's is very good. A lot of times we'll be dumping our familiars if we add like a card to our hand from him, where like we'll want to look at the top 3 cards of our deck, find one of the familiars, and then like dump it into the graveyard. And then one of the familiars will special summon itself. But Paula is one of the different ones where, as a Genesis summon, it can actually Genesis summon with a dragon, and then, you know, get another dragon. So a lot of times, Paula will actually be Genesis, like you can use Paula and then an Alba Vault to Genesis summon out the same Alba Vault. So that way, you know, you can heal. Or if you want, you can go with an Alba Vault into a Belcion with Paula. But Paula lets us reuse our Alba Vaults multiple times. Since, again, we are paying only 1 cost. So, like, if we have Alba Vault and Paula in our hand, we can play, like, Alba Vault for 1, you know, because we are using Overlord, and another one with Paula, and then just Genesis summon back into the same Alba Vault, so we can heal. And then, again, longevity. The point of this deck is longevity to survive as long as possible. Because again, with Overlord, we only have 11 HP. The first familiar we have is for catsith boots. It's a very good counter, being to hit some of like the darkness decks that have a lot of level 3 or heavily rely on their level 3s. Gets rid of like Schrodinger's cats if we do hit it. As well as, again, with Shiori, this can go into a Belcion, or with Paula, because you can go to level 2, we can still get into Alba Vaults. Next we have is for Ragdoll catsiths. Get special summoned when you hit it off of the counter. But again, it's another familiar target that we can shuffle back into the deck with Shiori. Or even if we need to go into level 2 with Paula to go into Aris level 2 if we need to. Next we have is for beastfolk Barbarian. It's a warrior, so we can gen summon it with other units if we need to. Mostly Shiori, since Paula can't go into level 1. But then Barbarian is just 5 HP, so again, which is very good clearing power, as usually 5 HP is the main threshold you want to hit in this format. And then the last familiar we have another familiar, which is the Calico Cat sith. So just a plain familiar. It's unfortunately it's not a counter, but again, our counter spots are pretty tight as it is. But again, can go and become it can become a level 1 or 2. So again, with Paula, you can make it go into a level 3 like an Alba Vault, or if you need to with Shiori, you can go into Belcion. And the last reunion is for Yomajin Expedition Survivors. It is a warrior, so again with Shiori you can gen summon into it, but we're actually using it for its 5 HP to shove into the defense zone. You could consider running the level 0 one of but it's this guy on the original card from set 1, where he's, instead of 350, it's 151, so that way it can still deal damage. But this one is usually where it'll always be placed into our defense zone. And there's a card that takes advantage of, special summoning it back into play. So the first of our main control cards is, or to hit like against, certain decks for the controlling aspect. We have this Skystrike Arrow, which is just a very good card where it replaces itself. If you hit off damage, it goes into the field zone, but it replaces itself where if it uses any of its abilities, it can draw a card. So as good as it can get rid of charges on pesky units that may have like charge shield, as well as the main thing is that it also stops other Genesis summoning decks that take use of their graveyard, like Shiori's or Paula's. Or even like other cards like Captain Liberty, or like the zombie deck that tries to recur things or reuse its graveyard. So Skystrike Arrow is very good for that. Again, you have to use the ability before your opponent actually like pays like removal costs for anything. So like for example, if they say like they're going to use a card in their graveyard, say like Captain Liberty, you could again just remove Captain Liberty himself, but if there's other cards that try to trigger in their graveyard, like they try to special summon themselves, or it says like special summon level 0 in their graveyard, you have to actually remove any potential level 0s. You can't wait for your opponent to choose the targets for that. But again, this is the main. This card is mostly to control other Genesis summoning decks that try to revive familiars, or even like Abyssal Concerto, where you can remove certain ones. And then the next control card we have is for Festival of Flowering Lanterns. So this card, while it's in play, or when you damage it, it goes into your field zone. But as long as it's in your field zone, no player can move any card in a damage zone to any other zone except through healing. So what that means is that this will stop cards like Schrodinger's cat, because it cannot remove itself from the graveyard or from the damage zone to the field because it is trying to move itself that's not healing. This will also stop Aris, the level 3 Aris, which is also why we're not using, because it says both players. So that's why most of our damage removal is through healing. This also stops cards like Well of Id, where your opponent tries to like cycle through their deck, get cards out of damage, and then try to replace them with other things, or try to hit, field cards. So this card is very good for that. And then if you stack up with multiple of these, because you only really need one in your field zone, but when you start getting multiple of these, you can use it to special summon level 0 from your graveyard. So we have like, the Yomajin Front Survivors is a good defense card to shove into the defense zone. As well as you can revive maybe like catsith or your familiars you know, the level 0 familiars. If you want a special with Paula, or even with shiori, because maybe they got rid of another target. So again, Flying Lances can be very good for stopping a lot of various types of decks, especially if you know which ones you are playing against. So again, when you play multiple games, usually you'll play best 2 out of 3. Usually the second and third game, you'll know kind of what your opponent's doing, and you know which field spells you can keep in play. Because like with Festival of Flowering Lanterns, if their opponent has nothing to do with moving cards out of their damage zone, or like swapping cards out, you can just easily just play it. But again, this will also stop cards like the Minotaur from set 2, I believe, or set 3. I forget which ones they're from. But anyways, it will stop those type of decks to try to, you know, cheat out damage, or play them from damage specifically. Or even cards like Schrodinger's Cat, the original event card. It can also stop cards like that. But the last card we have is for the Grace of Spring. So there's other variants where you could fudge the counter level a little bit. So you may have to reduce the number of Belcions, but you could replace this with the Astromancy, which is just the draw 2 Volnar card. But with this deck, we don't necessarily need pure draw power, because with Belcion we're playing it for free. So we don't need the raw draw power, whereas like with Grace of Spring, it's more of a selective type, because you get to look at top 4 and you pick one card from there that's a non-legendary from it. But then also I wanted to mention with the non-legendary is that this deck actually runs no legendary cards at all. You could make space for cards like Koga from Yomajin Front. You could even consider running the Demon, because it does increase your cost a little bit more. Or even Von Rain, which is the dragon from set 3, the legend. But one thing with this deck is that it takes use that a lot of times I think legends, because of how, you know, since they're restricted to one anyway, a lot of times people are thinking, oh, you know, you can just place them in. But I think that sometimes, you know, hinders a deck where, especially when you have a deck cost, is that you have to work around those extra, you know, like smaller things. And for cards like Koga or the Demon, they are counters. So you have to think about, you know, how consistent do you want your counters. So like with this one, because we were aiming to hit these field spells, we want to make sure we don't cut them. But then at the same time, we don't want to cut our familiars, because again, our counter familiars are more important because they guarantee go to our graveyard that cards like Shiori or Paula can hit them. So that way we can Genesis summoning more reliably. But again, you can always change the deck how you feel. Like maybe 4 Belcion is maybe too much for you. You can always reduce it to like 3, place Von Rain in, and then you have an extra like 1 cost you can change in. Like maybe you can make an Aris into a level 3 Aris, because maybe there's a chance where you don't have flowering festivals. But then you may have to figure out about the warrior situation, where there are some warriors here that you can target if you were to play the level 3 Aris. So there's still workaways around that as well. But as always, the deck list will be in the description below. And if you have any comments or questions, you can always ask and I'll try to reply to them if I can. Okay? But with that, thank you for watching, and then I'll see you guys in the next one.